Picture this. You are scrolling through Google Earth at 3 in the morning, zooming across mountain ranges like you are some kind of digital god, and suddenly you spot it. A peak so remote, so impossibly distant from civilization that it makes Everest look like a tourist trap. You zoom in closer, squinting at your screen, and think to yourself, has anyone ever actually stood there? The answer might shock you. We live in 2025. We have robots on Mars, AI that can write poetry, and delivery drones that know your address better than you do. We have mapped the ocean floor, charted distant galaxies, and yet there are still mountains on Earth that have never felt the touch of human boots. Not because they are too tall, not because they are too dangerous, though many of them are absolutely terrifying. No, some of these peaks remain untouched for reasons that are far more fascinating than simple altitude or weather. Let me take you on a journey to the most impossible to reach mountains on our planet. And trust me, by the time we are done, you will understand why some of these summits will likely remain unconquered until the end of human civilization itself. Let's start with the big one, the ultimate prize in mountaineering, the white whale that haunts every serious climber's dreams, Gangkhar Puensum. At 24,840 feet, it is not even close to being the tallest mountain in the world. Everest towers over it by nearly 5,000 feet. But here is the kicker, Gangkhar Puensum is the tallest unclimbed mountain on Earth. Think about that for a second. We have put 12 people on the moon. Over 6,000 people have summited Everest. But this mountain straddling the border between Bhutan and Tibet has 0 successful ascents. Zilch. Nada. Now you might be thinking, okay, so it must be insanely difficult, right? Some nightmare of vertical ice walls and avalanche-prone slopes? And yes, it is definitely not a walk in the park. But here is where it gets really interesting. 4 expeditions have tried to climb it, and all 4 failed, but that was before 1994. Since then, nobody has even been allowed to try. In 1994, the Kingdom of Bhutan did something unprecedented. They banned all mountaineering on peaks above 20,000 feet. They shut it down completely. Why? Because in Bhutanese culture, mountains are not challenges to be conquered, they are sacred spaces where gods literally live. The name Gangkhar Puensum translates to White Peak of the 3 spiritual brothers, and climbing it would be like someone deciding to set up base camp in the Vatican's Sistine Chapel. But here is where it gets even more complex. The mountain sits on a disputed border. Part of it is in Bhutan, part in Tibet, which is controlled by China. In 1998, a Japanese expedition decided that if Bhutan would not let them climb from the south, they would try to get permission from China and approach from the north. They actually obtained a permit. They were ready to go. Then Bhutan found out, diplomatic tension rose, China revoked the permit, and the Japanese team had to pack up and go home. Think about the geopolitics of that for a moment. 2 massive nations, China and Bhutan, essentially agreed that some things are more important than conquest. In a world where we have commercialized space travel and are planning colonies on Mars, there is still a mountain, 24,840 feet tall, that is completely off limits because respect for spiritual beliefs actually won out, and it is going to stay that way. In 2003, Bhutan doubled down and banned all mountaineering, not just the tall peaks, all of them. Gangkhar Puensum is not just unclimbed, it is legally and spiritually untouchable. It is the ultimate forbidden summit. But let's talk about another sacred mountain that takes this concept to an entirely different level. Mount Kailash, in Tibet, is only 21,778 feet tall, small by Himalayan standards. You know what's crazy? It is probably one of the few mountains in the world where we can say with absolute certainty, if you wanted to climb it technically, you probably could. The routes have been studied. Back in 1926, British mountaineer Hugh Rutledge took a good look at it and called it utterly unclimbable. But he was British, and they said that about a lot of things then. The point is, Mount Kailash is not sitting there unclimbed because it is impossible. It is unclimbed because it is sacred to over 1 billion people. We are talking 4 major world religions here: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and the ancient Bon religion of Tibet. For Hindus, it is the home of Lord Shiva, literally where one of their principal deities sits in eternal meditation. For Buddhists, it is Mount Meru, the center of the entire universe in their cosmology. Jains believe their first spiritual leader achieved liberation there. The Bon faith considers it the seat of all spiritual power. Imagine trying to climb a mountain knowing that every step you take is desecrating what over 1 billion people consider their most holy site. The Chinese government, not exactly known for being overly sensitive to religious concerns, has outright banned any climbing attempts. They made it illegal. When Spain requested permission for an expedition in 2001, the international outcry was so intense that China not only denied the permit, but made the ban permanent and absolute. Here is my favorite part of the Kailash story. In the 1980s, Chinese officials actually offered legendary climber Reinhold Messner permission to climb Kailash. Messner was the first person to summit Everest without oxygen, and the first to climb all 14 8,000-meter peaks. You know what he said? He turned it down. Messner literally wrote the book on extreme mountaineering, and he said no because he understood that some mountains exist in people's souls in a way that transcends achievement and ego. That is the kind of restraint that makes you believe there might still be hope for humanity. But not all impossible-to-reach mountains are protected by spiritual significance. Some are just so absurdly remote that getting to them is more challenging than climbing them. Enter Mount Sidley in Antarctica. Mount Sidley is the highest volcano in Antarctica at about 14,000 feet. 14,000 feet does not sound that extreme, right? There are mountains in Colorado taller than that, but Sidley is in a different category entirely. It is located in Marie Byrd Land, the most remote region of the most remote continent on Earth. It is so isolated that no nation has even bothered to claim it. It is unclaimed territory, and it will stay that way because there is absolutely nothing there except ice, wind, and this one massive volcano. It was first climbed in 1990 by a New Zealand scientist who was part of a research expedition. The mountain did not see its second ascent until 2010, 20 years later. For comparison, Everest now gets hundreds of summits per year. Want to climb Mount Sidley? First fly to Punta Arenas at the southern tip of Chile, then take a 4-hour flight over the Drake Passage, some of the most dangerous waters on the planet, to Union Glacier Camp in Antarctica. Then you wait for weather windows that might not come. You wait for a specially chartered, ski-equipped aircraft to be ready. Then you fly another 900 kilometers across the vast emptiness of West Antarctica to the Executive Committee Range, where Sidley sits like a frozen giant in the middle of absolutely nowhere. One expedition leader described it as not exactly off the map, but pretty close. You are camping at 6,500 feet elevation on a polar ice sheet where temperatures can drop to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. If something goes wrong, if someone gets hurt, rescue could take days if it comes at all. The mountain itself features a caldera 5 kilometers wide and bizarre snow formations called snow mushrooms that sprout along the summit ridge like something from an alien planet. The caldera is huge, and the terrain is unforgiving. And the cost? We are talking upwards of $50,000 per person just for the logistics. That is before you factor in gear, training, guides, and the very real possibility that weather will scrub your expedition and you will go home having spent 5 figures to sit in a tent in Antarctica. But here is what makes it truly impossible for most people. It is not on anyone's radar. Sidley does not have the prestige of the 7 summits. It does not have the spiritual magnetism of Mount Kailash. It is just brutally, punishingly remote. One climber who summited it said the experience was not about the mountain itself, it was about standing in one of the most isolated places a human being can reach on this planet and feeling completely, utterly alone. No rescue helicopter is coming. No other expeditions are anywhere nearby. It is just you, your team, and the infinite white expanse of the Antarctic interior. That kind of isolation, that is its own form of impossible. Now, let us talk about a mountain that was impossible to reach until just a few months ago. Muchuchish in Pakistan's Karakoram range, 7,453 meters tall, spent years being called the world's highest unclimbed accessible peak. Note the word accessible, because unlike Gangkhar Puensum, you were actually allowed to try climbing this beast. People tried, and they failed repeatedly. Czech climbers attempted it 3 times in 4 years. In 2023, they got within 250 meters of the summit, that is like 2.5 football fields, and had to turn back. They were physically destroyed, out of supplies, and the weather was turning. Imagine being that close to making history and having to retreat. But here is the beautiful part. They came back. In July 2024, a Czech team of 3 climbers, Zdeněk Hák, Radoslav Gro, and Jaroslav Bansky, spent 6 days pushing up the mountain in alpine style, no fixed camps, no massive support teams, just 3 guys carrying everything they needed and moving fast. The temperatures were brutal, sometimes reaching levels that should have been impossible for summer climbing. Climate change has made Pakistan's high-altitude summers almost unbearable. On July 5, 2024, at 10:20 in the morning, they stood on the summit of Muchu Chish. The highest unclimbed accessible peak in the world had finally been conquered. When they came down, one of them said he could not focus anymore. He was over-focused. They were so exhausted, so mentally drained from the days of extreme concentration required at altitude that their brains were basically short-circuiting. And you know what? That climb only happened because these climbers had the patience and humility to fail, learn, and return. In an age of instant gratification, they demonstrated that some achievements require years of dedication and multiple failures before success. But the mountain that might be the most genuinely impossible to reach is not famous at all. It is called Mount Quiten, and it sits at the exact point where Mongolia, Russia, and China meet. It is only 14,350 feet tall, but good luck getting there. First, you fly 4 hours from Mongolia's capital to a tiny town called Bayan-Olgi. Then you drive for 7 hours in Russian jeeps over terrain that makes the word road seem generous. Then you hike for a full day to reach base camp. There are no porters, no Sherpas, you carry everything yourself. The base camp consists of 2 yurts where a local contact helps with cooking, and that is it. You are in one of the most remote wildernesses on the planet. The mountain sits in Altai-Tavanbog National Park, where bears, lynxes, and the endangered snow leopard roam freely. The weather is viciously unpredictable. Blizzards can roll in with almost no warning. And here is the ironic part. If you want to summit safely, you climb at night, because during the day the snow becomes unstable and avalanche risk skyrockets. So you are navigating technical climbing in sub-zero temperatures in the dark, hoping your headlamp does not die and that your judgment stays sharp enough to avoid crevasses. One expedition reported that their first summit attempt was completely shut down by a blizzard that appeared out of nowhere. They had to abandon the climb, hunker down, and wait. The entire expedition can take 10 to 15 days, and that is if everything goes according to plan. The crazy thing about Quiten is this: it has been climbed by a 5-year-old. It has been climbed by an 87-year-old. Several people with physical disabilities have reached the summit. So technically it is not that difficult, but the remoteness, the logistics, and the sheer effort required just to stand at base camp are what make it impossible for most people. You could be the best technical climber in the world, but if you cannot arrange 7-hour jeep rides through the Mongolian wilderness, you are not climbing Quiten. Let me tell you about a few other peaks that deserve mention. Labush Khang in Tibet, at 23,786 feet, sits in such a poorly mapped region of the northern Himalayas that there is still debate about what is actually a separate peak and what is a sub-peak. Only one serious attempt has been made by a Polish team, and it failed. Getting permission from China to climb there is notoriously difficult, involving bureaucratic hoops that would make a DMV look efficient. Then there is Tongshan-Jiabu on the border between Bhutan and China, 23,690 feet, which is so obscure that its first photographs were not taken until the year 2000. We had the Hubble Space Telescope taking pictures of distant galaxies, and we were still getting first photos of mountains on Earth. Only one climbing application has ever been recorded, and no attempt was made. Here is something wild. There are probably hundreds, maybe thousands of unnamed, unclimbed peaks in the Himalayas and the Andes. We do not even know exactly how many mountains exist. The ranges are so vast and so complex that new peaks are still being identified and mapped. Some of them might be significant, over 20,000 feet tall, and we just do not know about them yet. But let us zoom out for a second and think about what all of this means. In 2025, we have technology that can show us every square inch of Earth's surface. You can pull up Google Earth right now and virtually fly to any mountain on the planet. You can see satellite imagery, read trip reports, and watch YouTube videos of climbs from decades ago. Information is unlimited, And yet these mountains remain untouched. Some because of laws, some because of logistics, some because of spiritual beliefs that have endured for thousands of years. In a world where it feels like everything has been done, bought, sold, and posted on Instagram, these peaks represent something radical: restraint and mystery, the acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, not everything needs to be conquered. There is something deeply human about wanting to stand on top of mountains. It is in our DNA. We are explorers. We are achievers. The history of mountaineering is filled with stories of incredible courage, determination, and often tragedy. People have died pursuing these summits. They have sacrificed marriages, careers, fingers, and toes to frostbite, all for a few minutes standing on a pile of rocks and ice at the top of the world. There is something equally human about looking at a mountain like Kailash or Gangkhar Puensum and saying, you know what, this one is not for us. That takes a different kind of courage, the courage to accept limits, the courage to honor something bigger than personal achievement. I think about those Czech climbers who finally summited Machu Picchu. They succeeded where others failed, not because they were necessarily stronger or more skilled, but because they kept trying. They learned from failure. They respected the mountain enough to understand it would only be climbed on its own terms. And I think about Reinhold Messner turning down Kailash. Here is a man who climbed Everest without oxygen twice, who climbed all 14 of the world's 8,000-meter peaks, who literally redefined what was possible in mountaineering. And he said no to Kailash because he understood that some summits exist in the realm of the sacred, and that realm deserves protection. These mountains are going to outlast all of us. Gangkhar Puensum will still be standing there, untouched, long after every person reading this has turned to dust. Mount Sidley will keep its lonely vigil in Antarctica for millennia. Kailash will remain the spiritual center of the universe for countless pilgrims who will circle its base in reverence but never attempt its summit. And maybe that is exactly how it should be. Maybe in a world where we are constantly pushing boundaries, disrupting industries, and breaking records, we need some boundaries that remain unpushed. Some industries that remain undisrupted. Some records that stay unbroken. Because at the end of the day, these mountains are not really impossible to reach because of elevation or distance or weather. They are impossible to reach because we have collectively decided, through law, through respect, through simple logistical reality, that they should be. And in that impossibility, there is a strange kind of hope. It reminds us that the world is still bigger than we are, that mystery still exists, that some frontiers are meant to remain frontiers. So the next time you are zooming around on Google Earth at 3 in the morning and you spot one of these impossible peaks rising from the landscape like a challenge from the gods themselves, take a moment to appreciate it, not as something to be conquered, but as something to be wondered at, as proof that in this small, mapped, photographed, documented world, there are still places that belong entirely to themselves. And maybe, just maybe, that's the way it should stay.